welcome. I'm K.Dool from K.Dool Wellness, and this is part two of a two-part series that my team and I have been working on for you regarding providing support for people with substance use in the workplace. If you are interested in looking at part one of the interview, we have provided a link below, so you can watch both parts. This part focuses a little bit more on the how-tos. How do you have a conversation with somebody if you're worried about their substance use at work? How do you sound empathetic when you do so? What are some things that the workplace can provide for you so that you feel supported? And the first question as part of this is for my colleague Josh. And really, Josh, what I wanted to ask you is, how do we start to feel more comfortable with this topic, whether we're a coworker or we're management, trying to support people in the workplace?
I think the first step for most of us, especially if you're in a management or supervisory position, would be to kind of show a general interest in the person that you're working with, employee, if it's a colleague, um, you know, knowing a little bit more about them or asking a little bit more about them, sometimes could make all the difference just by doing that, let alone, going into personal details. So I think that having a general interest in the individuals that you're working around or with is important. And also from a supervisory point of view is to not only have your interactions with an employee be when it's punitive, when there's an issue going on and we need to address it. So I guess in that way, we're almost like normalizing being cordial and having that humanistic approach to dealing with individuals versus strictly having that management employee relationship, which can oftentimes feel adversarial.
What do you do if you're at capacity in your own life? So I've heard this from people. I have so much going on in my own life. It's all I can do to go to work and get through the day. I don't really have room for anybody else's problems. Maybe that's how I should have framed it. So what do you do if you're already overwhelmed within yourself and your life, and yet you've got this going on at work, and I'm asking you to be attentive to that person, but you don't have much left to give?
If you're a person of authority and you're carrying a lot of weight with you, um, by sharing something yourself, you're more likely to create an opportunity for somebody to be willing to share back, and so there's some reciprocity there. So when we are feeling like at capacity in our workplace, when you have a mutual space that you can share some of that stuff, it's a give and take, right? So you're able to give some of that burden you're bearing in that environment, as well as be the receiver of information that may be difficult.
And I think it's also a good opportunity to reevaluate yourself and why you're feeling so overwhelmed, right? Because everybody reflects back to us in life. And so sometimes this is an opportunity for you to make changes in your own life or your own work environment so that you're not feeling that overwhelmed anymore. And there
Yeah.
is an opportunity to change things up or have capacity to be more compassionate and empathic towards yourself and towards others. So that would be my suggestion too, is let's take a pause and look at why we're feeling that way and what we need to do moving forward so that you don't have to carry on feeling as though you have nothing left to give. Because that's not a good way to be either, right? And I think what I want to add to that is sometimes that's how substance use starts in general, is right. I have nothing left. I can't cope anymore with this. Nothing can change. I'm stuck. And so substances can often become a panacea or an escape from that. So therefore, it's, there was a saying my grandmother used to have, and it was like, but for the grace of God, there go I, right? And it could be any one of us at any time, depending on what situational factors present in our life. And I think that's something to be mindful of too, is if we're not taking care of ourselves, one, we can't take care of others, but then we are at greater risk for health implications, addictions, mental health issues as well. So it is a complex answer and it's a complex question. So I apologize to both of you for giving you that, but I think it's relevant because I hear that from family members too. I know, Josh, you had brought family into this conversation, and family members just feeling so completely overwhelmed and not knowing what to do and feeling guilty and feeling torn. Josh, how do you help family members that give you a call with these matters?
And I think it's that navigating that the two positions that often family members present with, which is that compassion, that genuine compassion for their loved one, or for that person in their life. And then the other side of it is also the hurt that they have to bear, or they do bear, by some of the behaviors or some of the outcomes that happen as a result sometimes of substance use. So I think that there's that duality that goes on. And so assisting individuals who come in, to have a space to share and to unload and unburden some of those pieces can be important. And that can happen, at the workplace too, if you have, if you're having those kind of deeper relationships with colleagues or supervisors, through some of these conversations that we've been talking about having with them. I think that allowing for those spaces can allow us to not fill our bucket so fast, and maybe be more present and be more aware and allow ourselves to heal or to help, depending on what the situation is for us and for our loved ones.
And knowing when to set a boundary and when to push a little bit more so that they can try, to do something different in their own life. It's just
Right.
this fine balance of this dance that often caregivers play or employers play in trying to support, and see things, hopefully change for that individual. So we had talked a little bit, when we were having our own conversation about this, in terms of what empathy looks like and how to have a conversation, kind of like a step-by-step guide for somebody that has this going on in their workplace. What do you think is the first step in addressing this with somebody?
Active listening involves letting them know that you're hearing what they're saying, and not just physically being present. So that's, maybe repeating back or asking for clarification that you've heard them correctly. Body language is really important when you're having a conversation with someone that's sharing something that makes them vulnerable or is quite sensitive. So having an open posture, and maybe facing them and making eye contact, not having your face in a phone or a tablet, while they're sharing that information. I know that's something that happens way too often, where we're here, I got a solution for you. Here's my phone. I'm looking at resources before they even have a chance to unload what they have to say. And maybe all they needed was that opportunity to unpack some of the weight they were carrying around and have a safe space to do that. Also, letting them know that you value their privacy, and that that depending on the context of the information they're sharing, that they can trust you with the information that they're going to share.
It's really just being able to say, I hear you, and I can understand how difficult this must be right now, and I'm sitting with you through this feeling right now. And that is the support that individual is looking for, is to just say, you know what, I'm here with you. And I think that can go so far in terms of helping somebody want to pick up a phone and get some support or look at treatment options for what's going on, versus feeling isolated and alone and ashamed of what's happening and wanting to hide. So I think, one of the things from this video that I always remember is just being able to say, yeah, I can understand what that would be like. And even if you can't, you know, try and imagine yourself in that person's shoes. What would your life be like? And I think as soon as we can do that and say, my goodness, if that was me right now, oof, this would be tough. That can
And
really change things.
I've had people say, right?
Mhm.
And it just gave them a space that they felt heard. Like, yeah, it is a lot.
Yeah.
And just that moment, or that, those few words gave them something.
So, Shauna, it's sometimes really difficult when we're talking to somebody about going to treatment or seeking services for addiction, for them to even fathom giving that resource of substances up, much less what it's going to be like long term. Can you speak a little bit more to how you work with people on that and the fear that comes up?
I think just really being sensitive to the person's attachment to what they've been using as a coping strategy for such a long time, and talking to them about substance use being on a continuum and it being progressive. I think we talked about that a little bit before, but also that everyone's goals around their use of a substance or alcohol are unique and individual, and that not every person needs to completely abstain from their substance of choice or alcohol. A step in the right direction is maybe even just to be curious and do some reduction or some limit setting to see what impact that has, and to determine whether there's actually an issue with control. So you can almost present it as a bit of a curiousness or a challenge to see what things might look like if you reduce a little bit, and then evaluate what some carrots of that might be. So for the next week, if you want to find a baseline of what your consumption's been like, because some people don't even know, they don't want to know. So it kind of gives them a baseline and puts a number or a lens on what it looks like to other people, maybe, and then just ask them to make a small reduction and see how that feels, so that the goal becomes their goal and it's not what they think other people think they need to do, so that they have some ownership of it. And people generally are more likely to commit to something when it's their choice and they feel like it's important, not because somebody else thinks that it's a problem. So getting that, being sensitive about the impact and letting them kind of try on a goal, and not have to be so finite immediately, unless, for instance, it's having serious medical implications. That's a different story. But yeah, just looking at it from a harm reduction lens, I would say.
I think a lot of us don't always understand that the brain is not functioning in the same way that a non-addicted brain is functioning in when somebody's actively using. And so they don't have the ability to make these higher level judgment calls that you or I might, and just simply go and access services. It's incredibly terrifying to think of a day without having a substance as an option, because the feelings that are coming up are just so overwhelming. Um, that is something that I think is helpful to try and understand, is what that would be like to live in that body and in that brain all day long, feeling that level of anxiety and depression and whatever else is going on, so that's just
They've
my.
taught themselves that it's easier to avoid the feeling than to face it,
Mhm,
and just let it happen and manage it.
mhm.
So that the fear that goes with that could be incredible.
And sometimes I think the other side of this is not wanting to be a burden to other people with those heavy emotions. And so if I just self medicate or I take care of this quietly over there, I'll be
Not
more functional. I won't cause any trouble and everybody's lives can carry on. Right. So it's not always a selfish decision to use a substance. Sometimes it's because they don't really like the version of themselves that's non medicated, and how what effect that has on their family or their colleagues too, right?
identifying it as, it's not their problem, it's my problem, so I'll deal with it. It's not their burden to bear.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, we're having this conversation, I think, too, to shed some perspective and light on what it's like to be addicted to a substance, so that people can better understand that when you're having this conversation, it's not somebody who just decided to go off the rails and, tamper with their lives and their families' lives. This is a disease, but it's also a lot of trauma, a lot of, as I mentioned in part one, a lot of unresolved emotion that hasn't been processed. And I think that helps us, once we understand that part of it, to have a more sensitive conversation when we do approach someone.
It's an opportunity to just plant a seed and recognize that, how they adapted may not be perceived as healthy right now, but it worked for them up to a point, right?
Mhm.
um, to get where they were,
Yeah.
and validate that as well.
I think that's a great point. And Josh, how would you, kind of to end on a message of hope, how would you add to a message of hope for people that are either dealing with colleagues and family members in the workplace with substance addiction, or the person themselves that's struggling?
Mm. I think on a hopeful note,
Mhm.
I've seen so much resiliency in human beings in general, that I think that we should all have hope when it comes to our loved ones, or individuals who are having a situation where maybe substances are being used as that coping mechanism right now. Because I think, like, Gabor Mate kind of brings us to light. He talks about where there's addiction, there's pain, but where there's pain, there can also be healing, right? And so we don't ask just why the substance, we ask why the pain. And I still think when we access that and we allow someone to even just touch that with them in a meaningful way, I think that could be the start of change for someone, right? To feel validated, heard, to think they have a voice, and that maybe some of the things that they can do that is within their reach can make a difference, because there's resiliency in all of us, and accessing it might be one conversation away.
That's right. And we all have kindness to give, right? So let's share that, and let's be there for each other, because we've all been through things. And whether it's substance use, or it's death in a family, or there's a breakdown in a marriage, anything that's happened, we go to work with carrying that backpack filled with that pain. And it's really important to have people at work that can support us. So I thank both of you for, participating in a really important conversation today. Some of your suggestions, I know will stick with people and will help them in the workplace too. And I hope that all of you have enjoyed the second part of this conversation. And please look at the first part as well. And maybe we will see you again sometime. Bye for now.